Have you ever been upside down? Have you ever been?
No, no.
There's this superstition about baguettes, which I didn't know about. I think this is mostly in France, but they never set a baguette upside down.
Mhm.
And the origin of this goes back to the Middle Ages when executioners, I guess, were kind of like an honored part of society, and executioners got free bread. Bakers would leave out bread for the executioners to just take, and they would leave it upside down so that nobody else would touch it. And when the executioner came in, he just knew, I grabbed the upside down bread. And so now there's an association between upside down bread and a bringer of death in France.
You know what's interesting is I don't care for the French.
That is.
Yeah, and it's complicated, as you can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, that is the origin of a baguette.
It's complicated for me.
It's also amazing in such a short life to develop such a strong prejudice.
I just don't like their vibe.
Okay.
It doesn't really go deeper. I will say I did not know that superstition. But the idea of an upside down baguette disturbs me to my core. To me, it really evokes a turtle being put on its back. Or like a cockroach or something, a beetle that can't turn itself right again. And I just think about how helpless I would feel if I were put on my back like that. Because I can't right myself. That's not the way it should be. There is one good thing about that story, and that is free bread.
Good afternoon, Lambert's Cafe.
Hi, I'm calling for Adam or Luke.
Just a moment.
Thank you.
Norman and Patty are no longer with us, and they are missed very much. But the entire crew.
Lambert's Cafe, this is Adam.
Hey, Adam, this is Ian. I think my friend Eva let you know I'd be calling.
About what?
About the throat rolls.
Okay.
Did you not talk to Eva, or?
Yeah, I think it was Luke. I can get him real fast.
Okay, sounds good.
Hold on.
Calling Lambert's Cafe, the only home of throat rolls. We appreciate your patience while on hold and would like to let...
Lambert's Cafe in Stockton, Missouri. This is Luke. How may I help you?
Hi, Luke. My name's Ian. I think Eva let you know I'd be calling.
Yes, yes. Are you the guys from New York?
Yeah, that's us. That's
Okay.
us. So, Eva, my friend, told me that she and her husband, Will, were driving through Missouri, and they kept seeing these signs for Lambert's Cafe that said, home of the throat rolls. Do I have that right?
Yes, sir. We have them all up and down the interstate.
Okay. So, even Will thought that throat roll was some way of making bread, but I take it they did not have that right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we actually throw the bread to our customers out on the floor.
Okay. How did that start?
So, it's been a while ago. Our original founder's son, his name was Norman Lambert, and he was actually passing out extra rolls in the cafe one day, and it was kind of crowded, Sunday afternoon, busy after church, and the guy was in the back, and he said, hey, man, just throw the dang thing. So he did, and then everybody else kind of took on, and that's how it all started. That's how it began.
All right, I've never been to a Lambert's, but I'm picturing just chaos.
Absolutely, yeah. We feed about 3,000 people a day on a busy day. So
Wow.
yeah, we're pretty busy sometimes. Yep.
So how many rolls are in the air at the same time?
Usually, well, we have a roll thrower per each side. So we see 520 people per side of the dining room. We have 2 dining rooms, and so we have both of them going out about every 5-6 minutes with about 5 or 6 dozen rolls apiece. So they're just kind of the whole time they come out, they throw the rolls, come back, get more. We come out there and we sling them.
Okay, so you said the person that throws the roll is called a roll thrower. I guess
They're a roll thrower, yes. That's their job title. That's all they do, just throw the rolls. Yep.
So, like, you will be hiring, and it'll say roll thrower.
Sure. Well, we hire in at positions that are a little lower than that. It's kind of a little more of a touted position. We start out a little bit lower than that, and you kind of work your way up to being
Have you ever? So what's your job at Lambert's?
I'm a manager here.
Did you get to be a roll thrower at some point?
I did. I threw rolls for about 2 years. Yes, sir, I did.
Were you nervous the first time you?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Absolutely. My knees were shaking. Sure, yeah. It's almost like walking on stage at a concert. You know, you
Yeah.
are the entertainment.
Has anybody in your time there? Have you ever seen anybody kind of not be able to cut it as a thrower?
Yeah, we we have, you know. Sometimes that does happen, and you know, we just kind of have to let them know that. And normally they, you know, they take it pretty well, or they really, really try to get better, you know,
Gotcha.
and step up to the plate and do a little better. Some people are just more naturally gifted than others in that department.
What happens when a roll lands on the floor?
We sweep it up, throw it the next day. No, I'm kidding, I'm kidding. No, we just sweep them up and throw them away.
Well, Jess, so you're sitting on this counter in the home of this woman who it sounds like was just broken, just had a breakup.
Yeah, I try not to get too involved in human machinations, but I guess broken up with is what happened to this young woman. I don't really relate to that because to me, getting broken up means you're gonna get broken and shared. That's a positive thing to me. But I understand it is not so positive for her. But I also don't really understand what the problem is. Like, her body is just fine. It's like truly all one piece.
She's not literally broken up.
No, I don't get that at all.
So for you, if I were to say in your community, if I were to say to you, I heard you were going through a breakup.
I hope to be going through a breakup. Would love to be broken up and fed to ducks.
I imagine having experienced baguettes when they are a few days old, I imagine the bit she's taking from you at this point, I imagine you're leaving crumbs.
Yes, I am here, kind of in a pool of my own crumbs. It's embarrassing, if I'm honest. This is really not me at my best.
Yeah.
When I was at the picnic, I saw on a branch an inchworm that, similar to me, was long and oblong in shape, but was moving, inching forward on the branch. And it got me thinking that if I could do that,
Inch
along, and go where I pleased, and even if not inching, maybe rolling, like a log, where would I go? It's a big world out there for a baguette. I think that maybe, especially in that moment at the picnic, I would have liked to see who else was there at the park. There were some families, some kids playing, some people, teenagers, smoking weed next to a tree. Other people who might like to see a baguette.
Maybe a dog.
Ooh, dogs can't get enough of me.
You're sort of, if I can say, kind of a combination of two things dogs love, which is food and sticks.
Yes, that is a very astute observation.
Picturing you just, in the grass, moving along like an inchworm, visiting each of these people.
And each of them can take a little bite of me. They can take a little piece in a way that just hasn't been possible for me, having to be right here.
You get to the last person and you're just one more bite.
Just one little boop at the end. Boop.
Is there anything you would say to a younger loaf starting out, or to your younger self?
I think if I were to speak to my younger self, as dough being roasted, or as virgin bread in the oven, I would tell myself that this is not my fault, and that I have really done everything I could do as a baguette. things are out of our control sometimes. I want to say, too, I also don't think this is necessarily the end for me. I think there is great potential for me to undergo another transformation. I could become croutons. I could get pulverized and used to bread a fillet of fish. I could become maybe like a bludgeoning object, sort of blunt force trauma weapon. Maybe. I could be like a walking stick for a very short person, like a sword for a child.
Right.
Very child-friendly and round on all edges. Or like a rolling pin. That could be interesting. That's kind of meta. Used to roll out the dough of something else.
Yeah, that's wild. Bringing new life, rolling out dough.
Yeah, maybe there are some other things I could contribute. But I really want to be a baguette. You know, I really want to do bread stuff.
I mean, there's always French toast, which I should say, you know, French toast in French.
Do they just call it toast?
No, it's. I don't speak French, so pardon my pronunciation, but it's pain perdu, which I think just means lost bread.
Well, number one, I feel very seen by that. I feel that's kind of what I am right now, is a lost bread. And number two, I feel complicated that concept was created by the French, who I, as I've said, have a prejudice against.
This is Everything is Alive. The show is produced by Jennifer Mills, me, Ian Chillog. Our editor is Hilary Frank. Additional production this week from Evo Walchover. Thanks, as always, to Emily Spivak. Jess, the baguette, was played by Jess Tom. You can find them on Twitter at Jess Tom, that's JESTOM, and on Instagram at Jess the Kid. You can see their solo stand-up show, Less Lonely, as part of the New York Comedy Festival, November 9th at the Bell House in Brooklyn. Jess is a writer on HBO Max's Our Flag Means Death, and you can see them in the movie Crush. A big thanks to Luke Hutchison, manager at Lambert's Cafe, for talking to us about road rolls. Lambert's has 3 locations. We are grateful to the recording of Emily Jones, when we first learned about the upside-down baguette superstition. Music in this episode from Blue Dot Sessions. Everything is Alive is a proud member of Radiotopia from PRX, Audrey Martovich, executive producer, and Yuri Lasordo, director of network operations. You can get in touch with us in a number of ways and find Everything is Alive t-shirts at everythingisalive.com. We'll see you soon.
Radiotopia from PRX.
Have a business, brand, or blog? You need Squarespace. Stand out with a beautiful website, engage with your audience, and sell anything. Your products, content you create, and even your time. With member areas, you can unlock a new revenue stream for your business and free up time in your schedule by selling access to gated content like classes, online courses, or newsletters, and stand out in any inbox with Squarespace email campaigns using customizable templates. And Squarespace makes it easy to display posts from your social profiles and automatically push website content to your social media channels. Head to squarespace.com/invisible for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, use the promo code INVISIBLE to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Have a business, brand, or blog? You need Squarespace. Stand out with a beautiful website, engage with your audience, and sell anything. Your products, content you create, and even your time. With member areas, you can unlock a new revenue stream for your business and free up time in your schedule by selling access to gated content like classes, online courses, or newsletters, and stand out in any inbox with Squarespace email campaigns using customizable templates. And Squarespace makes it easy to display posts from your social profiles and automatically push website content to your social media channels. Head to squarespace.com/invisible for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, use the promo code INVISIBLE to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. This is 99% Invisible. I'm Roman Mars. On March 21st, 2022, a small crowd gathered in front of the Musso and Frank Grill on Hollywood Boulevard in Los Angeles. They weren't there for the restaurant. Instead, dozens of photographers, reporters, and Godfather fans packed in together to catch a glimpse of the ground.
Commerce, we now declare today Francis Ford Coppola Day in Hollywood.
It was right there on one of the most famous stretches of sidewalk in the country that acclaimed film director Francis Ford Coppola received the 2,715th star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Even if you haven't made the pilgrimage to Southern California, you can probably already picture what the Walk of Fame looks like. It's a 1.3-mile walkway lined with terrazzo and brass squares. Each slab spotlights a salmon pink star and the name of a different famous celebrity deemed worthy enough to become a permanent part of Hollywood's urban fabric.
Your 99PI producer this week is actor, director, and Hollywood insider Gillian Jacobs. If her voice doesn't sound familiar, you might recognize her face from shows like Community or HBO's Winning Time.
The walk is located on Hollywood Boulevard from Gower to La Brea and continues on Vine Street from Sunset to Yucca. Back in 1960, the street's main features were grand old movie palaces like Grauman's Chinese Theater and the El Capitan. Those theaters are still there, but these days they're surrounded by crowds of Elvis impersonators, snake wranglers, and people in Elmo costumes hoping tourists will pay to take a picture with them.
Upwards of 10 million people a year brave the traffic and crowds and fight over LA's scarcest resource, parking, all just to snap a photo of a star with the name of their favorite famous person.
Before working on this story, I'd never actually gone to the Hollywood Walk of Fame, despite living in Los Angeles for over a decade. It might be snobbery on my part or a deep ambivalence about my own profession, but I could not understand the appeal of looking at names embedded in the sidewalk. That is, until one day last year when I made the rare journey to the Walgreens on Sunset and Vine to buy the hypoallergenic baby detergent my dermatologist said would help with my rosacea, and I realized I was actually stepping on a portion of the Walk of Fame. There was the expected mixture of movie stars from the golden age of Hollywood, musicians, television stars, you know, your Merv Griffins, your James Browns, but one name made me stop in my tracks. Dorothy Arzner.
If you've never heard of Dorothy Arzner before, you are not alone. Most people these days have no idea who she was, but in the history of Hollywood, Dorothy Arzner was a big deal.
A really intimate detail?
Intimate detail. Gossip.
You want gossip? I'm not very good at that.
Arzner was the first woman admitted to the Directors Guild. She made films starring Joan Crawford, Clara Bow, and Lucille Ball. And even though she stopped directing in 1943, she still holds the title for the most American studio films directed by a woman.
Which is impressive, but also super depressing, right? I had heard of her because she directed my childhood hero, Katharine Hepburn, in the film Christopher Strong. And as I've discovered more of Arzner's work in recent years, I've also come to love her wry sense of humor and her obvious skill in pulling funny, dynamic, even slightly mocking performances out of her actors. I also admire the hell out of her for being literally the only woman directing Hollywood films for much of her career.
I usually announce, if anyone doesn't want to work with a woman director, or with me being a woman, speak up now.
I felt giddy seeing that star there and knowing that she's been memorialized forever. I also felt sad, too. Dorothy's star was in pretty bad shape. She was streaked with cracks, and the bottom half of her travertine star legs were missing. As I stood there holding my hypoallergenic baby detergent over Dorothy's star, the thing that surprised me most is that I felt anything at all. Honestly, in my day-to-day life, I just don't think about the Hollywood Walk of Fame. But when I do, it's just another award in a town obsessed with celebrating itself. So why does this gimmicky, broken little star make me feel things? Why does Dorothy Arzner's name on the ground outside a Walgreens make me feel close to a woman I've never met, who died before I was born?
Because gimmicky or not, the Walk of Fame is the story of Hollywood, the film industry, and the very origin of stardom itself in 1.3 miles of sidewalk. Today, we use Hollywood as shorthand for the biz, and the biz as shorthand for the entertainment business. But there was a time when Los Angeles and the film industry weren't inextricably linked. In fact, its original home was all the way across the country, in the greatest city in the world, Fort Lee, New Jersey.
Like many professional actors in the US, I live in Los Angeles. And the reason I live here and not in Fort Lee is because of famous New Jerseyan Thomas Edison.
You do, actually. You live in Los Angeles because of Thomas Edison, because he was the ass of early cinema.
This is Lauren Steimer, Associate Professor of Film and Media Studies at the University of South Carolina.
Edison held over 1,000 patents in the US, including many of the patents for technologies required to make movies. And there was a problem with that.
Thomas Edison was the original patent troll. Since the 1890s, Edison sued everyone over patents, cameras, projectors, film stock, and then those companies had to pay him license fees. So if you wanted to shoot anything or screen anything, money goes to Thomas Edison.
Since New Jersey was where the tech was incubated, it was also where the production offices, studio stages, talent, and by default, the entire motion picture industry was based. But Edison's stranglehold over the technology also made it more difficult, expensive, and frankly annoying for other film studios.
And then over time they realized, well, why don't we actually move far, far, far away from the grasp of Thomas Edison, and we'll start our own thing.
It would be harder for Edison to enforce his patents from the other end of the country. And of course, the weather was better. So fledgling studios and filmmakers escaped to beautiful, distant, southern California.
In the early 1900s, Hollywood hadn't yet become the physical manifestation of the film industry. It was just another name on a map.
Hollywood was its own community, and there were a lot of real estate promoters here trying to build up this community and make it something special. And so when the motion picture industry settled here, it wasn't quite what they anticipated.
This is LaRon Gubler, former president of the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce, which is the entity that oversees the Walk of Fame. Hollywood was founded in 1887 when Harvey Wilcox and his wife Deida registered his 160 acres of land with the Los Angeles County Recorder's Office. These acres, just south of what is now known as the Hollywood Hills, were filled with apricots and fig trees. And for film studios looking for open space to build an industry on, it must have looked like heaven.
But the Wilcoxes were the opposite of showbiz people. They were religious teetotalers who envisioned their new community as a Christian utopia where vice would be banned.
Hollywood was a very conservative, straight-laced community, and stars and celebrities at that time were not looked upon favorably. In fact, they had signs in apartment buildings saying no actors and no animals allowed. So that was the original attitude towards actors back in the early 20th century.
But the Wilcoxes couldn't keep actors out for long. By 1910, Hollywood went from being its own municipality to an incorporated district of Los Angeles, and by 1911, the very first of many film studios in the area were built. Hollywood would be the new home of the big, bad movie business.
Oh, it was very down market. It was very shady stuff, the movies.
Ty Burr is a film critic and the author of Gods Like Us on movie stardom and modern fame. He says that in the nascent years of the movie industry, the very idea of a monument to film actors like the Walk of Fame would have been unfathomable.
You know, in the earliest days of movies, they didn't even call it acting. They used all these different verbs to describe what was going on: shamming, posing, playing, but never acting. It was just sort of being yourself in front of the camera. So whatever it wasn't acting.
Movies were viewed as a novelty at the time, Unlike today's films, early cinema rarely had narrative plots. They were mostly just snippets of life captured on camera. Films were also silent, no dialogue to memorize, so actors were pretty far away from thespians reciting iambic pentameter on stage.
And shockingly to this SAG member, performers weren't even credited, mostly because movie studios didn't want people to care about the actors.
Carl Laemmle, who founded Universal, they all realized that as soon as you started naming an actor by name and promoting them, you would have to pay them more money. So for the first 15 years of the film industry, actors were not named. You just got the title, you got the company that made the film, and that was it.
But during the first decade of the 20th century, the number of small movie theaters and Nickelodeons skyrocketed across the country. Production companies rushed to produce enough content to meet the growing need for new films. Movie studios relied on factory-style methods to create more movies, and would often cast the same group of actors over and over for the sake of practicality.
And because audiences were seeing the same actors over and over again, viewers were becoming attached to the faces they were seeing on screen.
One of the things I found fascinating when I was researching my book was how crazy people went to find out the identity of these people. So people would write to the film companies, to the Biograph girl, or the girl with the curls, or whatever they named them. And the letters that come up in the research are really kind of touching and sad and indicative of where we were going as a culture. People saying, please tell me your name. I won't tell anybody else, but please tell me your name. And just this yearning that comes across, and it's a new kind of yearning.
Soon, movie studios had no choice but to yield to their audience's demands and start identifying and then promoting their stars.
Once you name one star, you gotta name them all. And that's right there is where the star system is born.
You might understandably think that with all this new fame and prestige, all this collective yearning, that Hollywood actors would finally come into their power. But it didn't quite work out that way. Instead, executives like Carl Laemmle realized that stardom was a commodity that could be manufactured, controlled, and profited from.
Studios tied up actors in exclusive contracts, which meant they could only work for that particular studio. They had nearly complete control over their stars.
So you had not just to go where they wanted you to go, but you had to be photographed and be photographed how they wanted you to be photographed. So they would tell you to go to Musso Frank's, and there'll be some photographers outside, and you're going to have a dinner inside, and magically the photographers will find their way inside to a private restaurant.
Movie studios understood how these public spaces could be used to generate even more star power, so they started exerting control not only over which pictures the stars acted in, but where they went at night, and with whom.
If you were not romantically involved with anyone at that time, they would actually craft a narrative in which you were dating some other celebrity at the studio or newcomer at the studio that they wanted to promote to help their career.
Back then, an appearance at a restaurant like the Brown Derby guaranteed a write-up. Rival gossip columnists Luella Parsons and Hedda Hopper were permanent fixtures inside. It generated publicity for the actors and the restaurants, and let fans know where to go if they wanted to see stars in person.
Meanwhile, the neighborhood of Hollywood, which not long before had its no actors, no animals rule, quickly capitalized on the film industry and its celebrity status. If Detroit had its cars, then Hollywood had its stars.
It's like any other sprawling metropolis, yet this one is different. Its fame has spread to the four corners of the earth. Its name is known to practically every man, woman, and child in the universe. For this is fabulous Hollywood.
The press actually really pushed both the idea of the star and the idea of Hollywood as this glamorous, identifiable location. And it helped cement this idea that Hollywood itself was such a glamorous area.
Despite its reputation today, the truth is that not many movies are actually filmed in Hollywood, and this was true even back in the day. Of the 5 big film studios at the time, MGM, Warner Brothers, Paramount, Fox, and RKO, most were located in other parts of Los Angeles, not Hollywood.
Municipally, it is its own thing. And I think it's always existed parallel to the film industry, sometimes almost as a parasite of the film industry.
But movie makers understood the power of branding, and so the name Hollywood became synonymous with entertainment.
One of the most interesting aspects of Hollywood is the motion picture industry. This vast empire is also a potent factor in the economic life of Southern California. Its studios employ thousands of workers, electricians, carpenters, painters, seamstresses, artisans of every conceivable kind.
Throughout the 1930s, MGM Studios had actors like Clark Gable and Judy Garland on their roster. Dorothy Arzner, the director whose star I saw on the Walk of Fame, was at the peak of her career. She worked extensively with Paramount Studios, where she directed 11 features in 5 years. The movie industry was one of the biggest businesses in the world, and as it reached the height of its power, film became the economic lifeblood of Los Angeles. Nothing could stop Hollywood.
Nothing except for the Supreme Court.
So the Paramount Decision 48, it affected all of the major studios.
The Paramount decision was a landmark antitrust ruling that went after the big 5 movie studios who dominated Hollywood.
That's the number one thing that destabilized the industry, and that was kind of the very slow decline of the industry and their power.
Basically, the big 5 had a powerful monopoly over the entire motion picture industry. They controlled everything from the production of films right down to the theaters that screened them. If a studio owned a movie theater, it could shut out its competition by refusing to play any film from a rival company. The 1948 rule put an end to that, making studios give up control of their movie theaters and sell them to independent companies, which was great for competition, but bad for the system Hollywood had been built on.
On top of that, in the late 40s and early 50s, Americans were flocking to newly constructed suburbs far away from the city centers where movie palaces were located. Ticket sales plummeted.
Movie theater attendance dropped by 60% in some markets. It just dropped like a stone. And the studios were panic-stricken for good reason.
The Hollywood film industry was suffering, and with it, the District of Hollywood.
Retail had gone into a state of decline because people weren't coming over the hill to shop like they once did.
Laurent Gubler says that residents who fled over the hill for the San Fernando Valley suburbs weren't just ditching a night out at the Picture Palace. They were ditching the entire local economy. It seemed as though the industry and the neighborhood were in crisis.
So in 1953, in response to declining revenue and a distinct lack of good old Hollywood oomph, a man named E.M. Stewart, who was the volunteer president of the Chamber of Commerce, came up with an idea. It was a plan to harken back to the old, glorious days of Hollywood.
He said the tourists come here looking for stars and they're disappointed, so let's give them stars.
The Chamber announced in a press release that they were proposing an attraction that would maintain the glory of a community whose name means glamour and excitement in the 4 corners of the world, the Walk of Fame.
The idea would be to take the ethereal stars from the screen and place them into the ground where anyone could visit them. Instead of hoping, and then failing, to bump into William Holden at the Brown Derby, you can at least know that you'll have a small piece of him along Hollywood and Vine. And then as you're strolling along to take a picture of Humphrey Bogart or Claudette Colbert's star, oh hey, maybe you'll pop into Woolworths to buy a new handbag or duck into Musso and Frank's for a steak lunch. Very subtle.
So when they were designing the stars, what they were actually going to look like, there was a lot of discussion.
No one quite knows where the original idea came from, but Laurent believes the inspiration for the design of the walk came from the ceiling of the dining room in the Hollywood Hotel.
A lot of celebrities hung out there, and in their dining, on the ceiling, they had stars with the names of celebrities in them. And if you look at those stars, they are very similar to what ended up in the brand.
The Chamber of Commerce created 4 committees with experts in 4 separate categories: motion pictures, television, audio recording, and radio. The first members of the Motion Picture Committee included industry giants Cecil B. DeMille, Samuel Goldwyn, and Walt Disney. They comb through thousands of names dating back to the earliest days of Hollywood in order to decide who deserved to be honored on the brand new Walk of Fame.
At this time, there was a kind of cosmic shift taking place. By the 1950s and 60s, the actors who had inspired that new kind of yearning were changing. While the town and the film business were still relatively young, the movie stars fueling the industry were not.
The classic stars were getting old. And stars aren't supposed to get old. And what happens when a star gets old? That we really hadn't come to grips with that as a culture. But you get into the post-war era, and Gable's getting old, and Crawford's getting old, and all these things are just changing.
A permanent ode to the great stars that made Hollywood itself great seemed like a very appropriate tribute.
The walk debuted with a sort of soft open, with the unveiling of 8 stars: Joanne Woodward, Olive Gordon, Ronald Colman, Louise Fazenda, Preston Foster, Burt Lancaster, Edward Sedgwick, Ernest Torrance, and me, Roman Mars. Sorry, force that.
And in 1961, after years of debate over where it would go and who would be honored, if the color scheme would clash with the neighborhood, and if Charlie Chaplin was indeed a communist, the walk was finally installed.
They put in 1,500 stars all at once to create an instant tourist attraction.
The Chamber of Commerce wanted to acknowledge that this would be a living monument, so it left about 500 stars blank as placeholders for future recipients.
This was a pragmatic move because, let's be honest, of those first 8 names unveiled on the Walk of Fame, chances are you didn't recognize most, if any, of them. The Chamber knew that the industry was fickle, that people would eventually forget about their old favorites and move on to the next big star in line, whether that was Farrah Fawcett or Francis Ford Coppola.
It's a permanent memorial dedicated to a fleeting concept: fame.
Although it began as a ploy to generate business, the Walk of Fame ended up tapping into that intimate connection people feel for their favorite performer. The same one that had fans writing to movie studios in the early days of cinema, begging to learn the names of the girl with the curls or the biograph girl.
The Walk of Fame allows people to feel that they are in the presence of, in the sort of privy to, whatever stardust, whatever magic these people had. There's that gulf between, us and them. And there are very few places that bridge it with physicality.
And that is the story of how the Walk of Fame saved Hollywood.
So things really start to go downhill in the 1960s and 70s. Between the 60s and the 80s.
Yeah, it was never going to be that easy.
Despite the Chamber of Commerce's best efforts, the neighborhood kept declining. This was something that was happening to urban areas all over post-war America. But contrasted to its glory days, the decay of Hollywood Boulevard felt extra bleak.
Hollywood Boulevard becomes, a place where you find a lot of, what can I call them? Cheap stores for dollar items, $5 items, really, really cheaply made souvenirs, and those picture palaces. In the 1960s and 70s, if they're still around, they're showing porn.
There was a period in the late 70s and early 80s when it was difficult to find celebrities who would accept stars. The problem was Hollywood was going downhill, economically and physically, and it was becoming kind of rough out there on the sidewalks, and a lot of celebrities were reluctant to accept stars at that time.
Ron Gubler says that the Walk of Fame itself was never actually in any danger of disappearing, even as the urban area around it deteriorated, in part because of the ways the walk has had to evolve over the years.
Since it was first installed, the Chamber of Commerce has made a number of changes to its process. It added additional categories to honor, expanded the actual area of the walk, and began hosting unveiling ceremonies for each new star installed. So the celebrity receiving the star actually has to show up in order to get one.
And in the 1980s, a radio and television personality named Johnny Grant stepped onto the scene to try and shake things up.
Johnny was the world's greatest promoter.
And when he got his star, he got involved in the ceremony. He arranged for a military flyover and a brass band, and the committee that put on the Walk of Fame was so impressed with what he did for his own ceremony that they said, "Hey, Johnny, how would you like to chair the Walk of Fame?" And he immediately jumped at the opportunity, and really is probably the person most responsible for what the Walk of Fame has become today.
But one of the most important changes to the process was instigating a fee in order to receive a star on the Walk of Fame. In 1980, this started at $2,500 to help pay for installation, maintenance, and the unveiling ceremony. But by 2022, it's ballooned to $55,000.
In most cases, a studio or sponsor will foot the bill because it's great publicity.
There's a whole nomination process involved, so it's not like you can just shell out $55,000 and buy yourself a star. But the price tag, as well as how that money is spent, has been a point of criticism for the walk over the years.
Well, for me, the significance is that you only get a star on Hollywood Boulevard if you're willing to pay for it, or someone who's trying to get publicity for a film coming out pays for it, which is how most of them get put there.
This is Walk of Fame star recipient Francis Ford Coppola.
Wait, you know Francis Ford Coppola?
I know a guy who knows a guy. If you weren't aware, Coppola is the director of the Godfather trilogy, Apocalypse Now, and a personal favorite of mine, The Conversation. Even though his career spans decades, he says he didn't receive his star until early 2022 because of the hefty price.
Usually my films were produced by myself, and we did not spend money in PR in aggrandizing people like myself. But now, with the 50th anniversary of The Godfather, Paramount is willing to treat me to that, and certainly there are many people on that Walk of Fame that I am humbly proud to be in their company. One of them is Miss Arsner.
Miss Arsner, as in Dorothy Arsner, the film director whose broken star on the Walk of Fame first got me interested in this story. After Arsner retired from directing, she taught film at UCLA, where one of her students was actually a young Francis Ford Coppola.
Well, Miss Arsner was a wonderful teacher. She really made us feel as if she cared for us. And aside from that, she was a movie pioneer. She was one of the people who created the cinema.
Arsner had a reputation for being a director with an eye for new talent. She was able to help craft on-screen personas for new actors and mold them into stars.
She was always coming up with little tidbits like that, little pointers. And of course, the most significant one, that the director should always sit at the same place next to the camera, not only because that's the best view, but also it was so that actors would see that you're there, and because they're doing it for you. And if you're back away in some place where there are television monitors, the actors can't see who they're doing it for.
Arsner also had a successful career as a film editor before she began directing. Coppola says that she showed him some important directorial tips from back when you physically cut and paste film negatives, and you had to use your arm to measure the length of a scene.
I remember she told me once that, demonstrating that one arm length for a kiss was a long, sexy kiss, but 2 arm lengths was a really passionate kiss, and 3 arm lengths was a very sexy kiss.
And on top of that, Arsner made some pretty amazing technological contributions to filmmaking. She's credited with inventing the prototype for the very first boom mic. Here she is talking about how she came up with the idea in order to let the actress Clara Bow move around freely on set.
They'd hang the mic, and Clara Bow would have to say what she had to say and then be silent till she got over here if she moved. And it wasn't many days till I said to the prop man, "Do you have a fishbowl?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Bring it tomorrow and a ladder and hang that thing on it, and when Clara moves, you move that with her."
It might not be a microphone taped to a fishing pole anymore, but the boom is a piece of equipment that's still essential on film sets today.
In 1943, Dorothy Arsner retired from the film industry. It was probably much earlier in her career than she anticipated.
I got pneumonia on the last picture I made, which it took me some time to get over. And I didn't feel strong. You have to be strong to be a director, to stand up to the end.
Health issues aside, she was also a female film director and a lesbian. At this point, sexism and homophobia in Hollywood were squeezing out people like her. Arzner directed her last Hollywood film at age 46.
The fact that someone has a star on the Walk of Fame means that they achieved a level of renown and acclaim so immense that the Chamber of Commerce thought the mere sight of their name would entice tourists to the area. The reality is that the industry and the public have a short memory when it comes to people like Dorothy Arzner, and many of the names on the sidewalk that were once a draw have faded into obscurity. No, thank you.
Today, Hollywood Boulevard is in better shape. It wasn't all because of the Walk of Fame. In the early 2000s, the city invested millions of dollars of public and private money to build up Hollywood and Highland into a commercial district, equipped with a shopping center and luxury hotel.
Jimmy Kimmel does film there, and Hollywood has hosted the Academy Awards since 2001, except for in 2021 because of the pandemic. But the general area has undergone a sort of Times Square-ification, where it's, fine, I guess.
There's a lot of space, a lot of retail space that's taken up by, what would I call them? They're designed to appeal to